All right, we're back in action here. I want you to turn to page 157 with me and look at placing quotations there. This section is talking about the idea of how to structure your paragraphs in a way that catches the reader's attention. A common structure that a lot of journalists use is they take the information, the lead at the top, then they'll add a paragraph that has more information, and then they'll add quotes thereafter. That's not to say that you can't lead off with a quote, especially if you have a really good quote. Um, I think later in this chapter, if not another chapter, there's a quote about it's like Merry Christmas and kill your dogs. Now there's more context to that quote, but that would be a great quote to actually use to start your lead off. Why would you want to start with something like that? Because if I read a quote, somebody saying about Merry Christmas and kill your dogs, that's weird enough that it's going to draw me in. That's strange. Okay. So you've got examples here where they give you an opening paragraph, your lead, then they build to another paragraph to give you more detail, and then they get to their quotes. Okay. Now, if you ever, like I said, if you have a really interesting quote, lead off with it, but it's got to be interesting enough that it's going to make me want to stay. Because remember, how many words do you have to catch the reader's attention? Do you remember? It's 14. It's 14 words. That's all you get. Okay. Transition paragraphs are exactly what they sound like. Transition paragraphs link quotes. That's the key there. I wish I was there because we would do an exercise together, and maybe we will when I come back. But transition paragraphs, this is the hardest part. You can be the most objective, the most researched, the most balanced when it comes to personal bias and things like that. You can be all of those things as a journalist, but if you don't know how to transition your paragraphs from one topic to the next, you won't succeed. That's where a true journalist stands out. I want you to look through page 158, all of that, okay? And the reason that I'm speeding through this part is because there's a lot here in the next few pages that I really need to dedicate some time to. So let's jump over to page 160. You're going to see a lot of punctuating quotation rules here. A lot of this is standard issue English stuff, but some of them are not necessarily as cut and dry as you would think. Okay, so I'm going to go through these as quickly as possible. We're going to focus on a few of them that are different. There's even one that's wrong that the book has in there wrong, and I'm going to go over those and tell you why that one specifically is wrong. Okay, number one, place a comma between the end of a direct quotation and its attribution. You've got two incorrect versions of it. I want you to obviously pay attention to the correct. A lot of you will do the second one, and I'm not saying you specifically. I'm saying students in general. They'll put the idea is extremely ludicrous, period, end quote, he said, period. That's wrong. You can't do that. Don't do it. Don't do it. The correct way to do it is to put a comma and then end that quote and put the end punctuation after said. Okay. Side note. In journalism, we never say says, we never say exclaims, we never say shouts, or any of these other ways that you could say that someone is talking. The only way we ever in journalism say someone said something is said. Said says it best. If you become a part of my staff or Mr. Meyer's staff, or you get into journalism after high school, you can't say says. Why can't you say says? Because they're not presently saying it. It is said. Why can't you say shouts or exclaims or murmurs? Why can't you say those things? Because they are loaded words. They are biased words that you may consider something a shout when I think that they're just talking a little loud. It seems petty, but you've got to be careful with words like that. Now, that's a side note. That's not in here yet, but you'll find that out when you grow up. Number two, when the attribution comes first, place a comma between the verb and the direct quotation. The incorrect way to do this is he said and leave nothing there, not putting a comma there. You've got to have that comma right after said. Okay? When ending an indirect quotation with an attribution, place a comma directly before the attribution. Okay? Incorrect, the crowd was the biggest one in years, Smith said. We would want to put the comma after years, right before Smith said. Now, why is the information there not in quotation marks? Why? It's not a direct quote. All right, it's a paraphrase. Number 4, when beginning an indirect quotation with an attribution, no comma is needed. So, right there where it says Smith said, comma, we don't need that because we're not doing, we're doing an indirect quotation at this point. All right, Smith said the crowd was the biggest one in years. That's not literally word for word what he said. That's a paraphrase. Okay. Always place punctuation marks inside the closing quotation marks. That is an always, a must, most of the time. Okay. So incorrect. The situation is getting out of hand. Then you got your end quote, then a comma, and then she said. That's not right. All right. The problem there is we've got to put that comma after hand, like it's you see there. Now, what was I supposed to do? End quote, question mark, he said. No. No. What you need to do there is put the question mark after do not put a comma at all, and then after asked, put a period. Okay? Now, it's not a problem to say asked. Now, I just told you always have to say said. Well, if they're asking a question, you can say asked because it's factual that they were asking a question. Said would still work because a question mark also implies that it is in fact a question. Okay? Use only one punctuation mark at the end of a direct quotation. What was I supposed to do? Comma, question mark. If you do that, I will take my shoe off and beat you with. That is a terrible. Don't ever do that. Okay? Don't do it. That just look at that. You should look at that and laugh immediately. Comma, question mark. All right. I'm not saying if you've ever done that before that you shouldn't be with us, but you should play in traffic. Don't really do that. What was I supposed to do? Question mark. He asked. Period. Boom. I'm getting so worked up here. I'm shaking the desk. I'm sorry. Okay. Number 7. When using a punctuation mark that relates to a direct quotation, as in a question mark or exclamation point, place it at the end of the quotation, not at the end of the sentence. So if the whole thing is a question in and of itself, you place the question mark at the end. But if we're direct quoting somebody and they ask a question in it, that question mark has to go inside the quotes. Okay. So the right way to do that was, what was I supposed to do? Question mark, he asked. Okay. You wouldn't put it the way that they have it with the question mark afterward because he asked is a declarative statement. Okay. Number 8 is wrong. The way it's written in the book is wrong, and I would like to meet these people, and I don't know. I don't know. They need some basic grammar lessons in journalism here. When using a quotation mark that relates to the sentence and not the quotation, place it at the end of the sentence. What's wrong with that? I want you guys to pause the video and ask yourself what's wrong with that. Please do. Well, I hope you're back because I'm going to tell you what's wrong with that. When using a question mark that relates to the sentence and not the quotation, place it at the end of the sentence. Okay? So, the correct way, I'm just going to jump right to the correct way to do this. Wasn't it Shakespeare who wrote the line, to be or not to be? That is the question. They put the question mark after the end quote because they're asking a question from the beginning. Does that make sense? I hope it does. All right. Same thing with on page 161 there at the top. Wasn't it Shakespeare who wrote to be or not to be? That is the question because wasn't it Shakespeare is asking a question. Right? Good. All right. Let's move on. You can play that back if you need to. I didn't really explain anything that's not already there. Use single quotation marks to offset a quotation within a quotation. This is like just like in math. If you're in algebra and you've got two sets of functions inside of one larger function, how do you set those off? You can do one of two things. You can have several sets of parentheses, or my favorite. It's opposite of what I see. Okay. Or you can do a bracket. All right. You can do a bracket on the outside, and then do your subsets of parentheses inside. That's the same idea here with single quotes. You got your double quotes on the outside, and then you got your little single quotes down on the inside. Right there on the inside. Okay. Closing quotation marks are not used at the end of a paragraph. The same speaker is continuing in the next paragraph. That's big. And you need to internalize that, because if somebody, let's say we're interviewing Dr. Sears, for instance, and we're just rattling off a bunch of things that he says, we don't continue giving attribution and putting the quotation marks as we go. Okay? Okay. If I were there, I would have you do your beat number 1 there, which is quite long. Be rewriting those sentences. But for time's sake, we're going to keep forging forward. Okay. Page 163. Pulled quotation is just something interesting that someone has said that we take out and we make it big on the page and make it a graphic element. The reason that we do that is we want to pull the readers in. We want to. You don't do something that's boring. Now, if you look at the example here, and I don't know if we have the same example because I have the old book, you have the new book. But the pulled quote, if you look at figure 7.2, and hopefully we're on the same literal page here, the pulled quote is, I think the hope is that if you hear what happened back then and you see the hatred again, you will stand up. That's not entirely interesting. That is not something that I would use as a pulled quote. I've not read the whole thing there, but there are definitely better ways to do pulled quotes to make your articles a little more interesting. Okay, we're going to jump to page 167 where it says what to attribute. What I want you to know here, you need to read through that. I'm not going to read much out of this. The key that I want you to get out of that section is you have to attribute anything that isn't common knowledge. All right. If you are describing how to tie shoes, you don't have to attribute anything. We all know how to do that. But if you're talking about some statistics on something that isn't common knowledge, like statistics on oil fracking, which I know nothing about. Sounds cool, and I like to say the word fracking, so that's why I picked it. If I were to give you a bunch of stats about that, I would have to attribute those things because they're not common knowledge. All right. I want you to read all of the. I'm not going to read through them. Yeah, you guys are big kids and big boys and big girls, and you can read through those things. But what I do on page 168, 169, and 170, I want you to pay attention. I've got like 2 minutes or so. I want you guys to look specifically at number 3. When a direct quotation is longer than one sentence, the attribution is normally placed between the first and second sentence. This is not always true, and I want you to write this somewhere. I don't know if I asked the last class who had the book that you have right now to do this, but this is not always true. The only time that you don't have to do number 3 is when it ruins the flow of the quote. Okay? If it's ruining the flow of the quote, you keep going with it. Don't place that attribution until it feels right at that point. But otherwise, the rule is pretty decent. Okay? I think. Oh, number 7, they've got a wrong instance there. Let me see. I'm not going to go over that one. I want you to read that yourself because I'm running out of time here. I've got 1 minute and 15 seconds left. I want you to look at that and figure out what is wrong with that. Okay? And then I want you guys to talk about it with your partners there. Okay? Lead in, you can read the definition there. Attributive verbs, that's what I'm talking about with not saying exclaimed or anything. It's always said. Asked is also okay, but said says it best. And that is chapter 7. I got it done in less than 30 minutes. That's record time. If you need any of this again, I'm going to put this on Classroom. You can watch these videos there. Mrs. Spencer is going to go over them with you as well. She's going to play those for you. And hopefully you'll get a little more out of it having had me go over it. All right. I will do chapter 8 here soon. I'm not going to do it tonight. I'm done. I'm going to go play with my son. I think he's asleep. I'm going to go kiss on his head. So, peace.